I began on Wednesday night a new series of lessons called Outnumbered, when true believers are a minority. And through the next few Wednesday nights, I'm going to continue this series. It'll be online for those of you who would like to follow it there, beginning on Wednesday night. But I thought I'd bring the first lesson on a Sunday morning to sort of whet appetites for what is to come. According to the most recent census data, for the first time in American history, a majority of babies, that is, children under the age of 1, are now kids of color. The U.S. is changing demographically. The media has dubbed this phenomenon the browning of America. Demographers say that by the year 2042, our country will no longer have one clear ethnic majority. Everybody in America, white, black, brown, Asian, or any other kind, Native, or any other kind of American ethnic group, will all be minorities. There will no longer be a single ethnic majority. And I find that interesting. That's just 20 years away. I find that interesting because it's possible the term minority will become obsolete because we'll all be one. Now, it remains to be seen how Americans will react when everybody occupies a minority status. Will racial distinctions become less important than they have been in recent years as we, the people, all of us, will have the same basic status in America, a minority status? Will we rally together? Let's hope so. Or will we maintain our narrowing ethnic identities and wage war on everybody not like us? Let's hope not, because that would be a big mistake. Only time will tell. You see, America is a story of people with high ideals, unlike any country before us. I mean, that's just a matter of record. A country of people with high ideals, that all men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among those rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that all peoples from all backgrounds have been welcomed here. People from virtually every nation on earth have come here, made success stories of themselves. It's a unique place. But the truth is, from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement, our ideal often proved to be an ordeal. Having been raised as a member of the ethnic majority, and having been part of the ethnic majority all of my life, it's really hard for me to even imagine the indignity of having to get on a bus and go to the back of it or stand if a person of another ethnic group came on the bus and give them my seat. Having been a member of the ethnic majority all of my life, it's hard for me to imagine what it would be like if I were thirsty to not be able to go to an available water fountain. And certainly, having been a part of an ethnic majority for all of my life, I can't even begin to fathom what it would be like to be stripped naked and placed up in public on a block and inspected like meat for someone to buy me as their slave. But the truth is, that's humanity. That's humanity apart from God. The truth is, in most situations, minority status brings with it indignities and disadvantage and unfairness and character defamation and misunderstandings, if not outright hostility and persecution. And if you don't think so, you don't have to just look at our country. There are even greater examples of that, or I should say worse examples of that in other places. Imagine being a Jew in Hitler's Germany as a minority group. Imagine being a Kurd in Saddam Hussein's Iraq as a minority group. Imagine being Irish in early 20th century New York City. And I could go on and on. Those in the minority are often treated with disdain, seen as an underclass, viewed somewhat with suspicion. I'm sure that everybody with a good, sound mind would consider it an advantage to be in a majority, because a majority does have possibilities and privileges that most minorities simply do not have by option. But I'm not here today to talk about race. I'm not here to talk about class. I'm not here today to talk about ethnicity when I'm talking about a minority. I want to talk about another different new minority that is taking shape. And that new minority is Christianity. It really is. That same census also told us that Christianity is in great decline in America. The biggest shift in religious affiliation over the last 20 years has come in the category nones, not N-U-N-S, N-O-N-E-S. More than 20% of Americans today now say they have no religion. They're agnostic or atheistic. That is 14% more than just 30 years ago. That number was 6% just 30 years ago in the 1990 census. That is an extraordinary reduction in the number of people claiming even Christianity. But the truth is, it's much worse than that. It's not just in the country, it's among people and families who once would have been considered to be at least cultural Christians. Let me give you this example. I've been serving on the board of the Evangelical Christian School for 7 years. Every year, I always look forward to the first meeting in September of the board, because we get a complete breakdown of the school, the enrollment compared to last year and all the numbers and everything else. But one of the numbers that we get is we ask the people what church they attend. We ask the kids or their parents what church they attend. And for the last 6 years, the number one church that has been listed on our list is none, N-O-N-E. They don't attend any church. They don't have any particular belief system. That's a Christian school that people are paying a healthy tuition to go to. It's sort of fascinating what's happening in our country, this dichotomy between what we once believed and what we once were and what we are now. You see, in the 1990 census, 86% of the United States population identified themselves as Christian. But in just 30 years, that percentage has dropped almost 20%. Now you say, okay, well, that still leaves 66, 68% of people identifying themselves as Christian. And on the surface, that's still a huge majority. But how many of those people who identify themselves that way live biblically informed and biblically inspired and Christ-centered lives? Not many. And we know that from several indications. For instance, we know this: the average number of people at church on any given Sunday morning is 21% of the people. 21%. So you look around, you're a part of the 21% today. No, it's probably less than that because of the pandemic, because we're down about half. So probably today it's more like 10 or 11% of people in the United States even bother to do the most minimal thing you would do as a Christian, which is attend church on Sunday morning. Wow. You see, there is such a thing as cultural Christians, just like there is certain thing as cultural Jews. Many of the founders of the modern state of Israel had a proud Jewish pedigree and observed Jewish customs, but religiously, they were atheistic or agnostic. And some people will tell you today, some observers will tell you today, that as little as 6% of Jews living in Israel, in the modern state of Israel, are true Orthodox Jews, following the traditional values of their belief system. There's also such a thing as cultural Muslims. They were born into Islamic families and countries, but they do not ascribe to Sharia law, particularly if they've moved to the West. Most of the Muslims in America do not ascribe to Sharia law. They embrace a more Western way of life, and yet they still identify themselves as Muslims. They are cultural Muslims. And it seems to me the same thing that has happened to Jews, the same thing that's happened to Muslims, also happened to Christians. There are a whole lot of people who would identify themselves as Christians, but you really can't point to any one single thing that would cause you to believe that they really have a biblical belief system or they practice following Christ. It's just something they fill out on a form. People born in the United States have a history and a tradition shaped by Christianity. So they call themselves Christian, like people born in Israel might call themselves Jewish, or like people born in a Muslim country might call themselves Muslim. They maybe acknowledge Christmas and Easter, but in reality, they give no real credence toward living the Christian life or the Christian lifestyle. They pledge allegiance to one nation under God, but there's not much in life that has actually been brought under God's scrutiny and the authority of God's word. Now, let me tell you why that is dangerous, and let me tell you why that is a bigger problem in the minority status category than racial issues are or ethnic issues are. Because I know, I've seen the evidence both ways. I know that when people are black and white or yellow or brown or red, I've seen them come together. I've seen them come together in this church. And as long as they have a faith belief system that is similar or the same, that will carry them through. And that will make a difference. And so can we survive everyone being of minority status as far as our race or ethnicity is concerned? Yes. We've already seen it over and over again in our country, in our church. Can we survive becoming in a minority status in terms of real Christian values and a Christian culture? I don't think so. And there's evidence of that all over the world today, in a number of different countries. And so Christians fall into the same category of cultural Christianity. In fact, the Barna Research Group, which is the best known Christian research group, tried to get a handle on the proportion of real biblically devoted Christians living in America. And so they did the largest study they had ever done, and they divided people who claim to be Christians into two categories: cultural Christians and captive Christians. Cultural Christians, casual Christians, were minimally active in applying their faith. They held Christian convictions only when they were convenient. They're just as likely to cheat on their taxes as anybody else if they get the opportunity and don't get caught. They're just as likely to curse and swear and deny the Lord in a certain situation than they would as a non-Christian would be, depending on the circumstances of the situation. Whereas captive Christians made a real effort to apply the moral and spiritual truths taught in the Bible, despite the consequences that may come to them because of that. captive Christians really had the character of Christ within them. And the researchers at Barna identified 66% of confessing Christians to be casual Christians, cultural Christians. 16% were captive, committed followers of Jesus. So, folks, this is more of our reality today. 16% of Americans are really serious about the Christian faith. And that's the number that matches up pretty closely to the weekly church attendance and involvement of people. 16%. And keep in mind, that's people of all faith and belief systems, all denominations, all non-denominations, that's all of them thrown in together. 16% of Americans. That, my friends, is minority status identified. And the vast majority of our fellow Americans, a whopping 84%, have adopted a different set of values. In today's America, genuine, substance-filled expressions of Christian faith are absolutely frowned upon. For many years, crosses and nativity scenes, and we follow these stories one at a time all over our country. Crosses and nativity scenes have been removed or banned from public property. For many years, members of our military are under widening restrictions about how they can and mostly cannot express their faith. For 30 or 40 years, public schools and universities have become openly hostile to even an expression of Christianity in a schoolroom by an administrator, a teacher, and now even a student. And we see these cases all the time, and they're very real. A teacher cannot have a Bible on their desk, an unopened Bible on their desk in the public school system. They could be fired for that. There have been several who have been. A teacher can be fired for sending an email with a devotional thought in it. One of our teachers in our church was disciplined for sending a devotional thought in an email to other willing teachers. Wow. And it's not just public education. In recent years, we've seen this happen on the job. Almost every job. Can't have any expression of faith at all. You'll be fired, disciplined, or worse yet, sent to sensitivity training for a month. And we just see this happening everywhere across the board. And the person who dares to stand against that and to stand up for biblically based sexuality and stand up for morality and stand against things like same-sex marriage or abortion is excommunicated from life. You'll get fired, cast off social media. We've also had that happen with one of our members. Cast off social media or disciplined in some other way. The one anathema in our modern world is to suggest that there's one right way to approach God Almighty. That one religion is quantitatively and qualitatively better than any other religion. And that is the words of Jesus himself, which surely no one who claims to be a Christian can possibly deny. He said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." He said that purposely. He used the definitive, purposely, the way, the truth, the life. And then to put the cherry on top of the ice cream and make sure everybody understood, he said, no one can come to the Father except through me. You say that in America today in certain places, you'll be ostracized, maybe even arrested. Much of our government, corporate America, the entertainment industry, the news media, our institutions of higher and lower learning, all join in to ridicule any kind of claim of exclusivity, including this one. So I want you to understand, this is not imaginary. The very statements of Jesus put all true followers of his in the crosshairs of a conflicted culture. And that's different from the way I was raised and many of you. When I was a child and a teenager, a sort of Christian consensus existed in America, even though there were still a whole lot of cultural Christians. Not everybody in those positions in the media and government and corporate America and the news media and institutions of learning, not everybody was a Christian, but you could basically count on the school and the media and the government to support a biblical perspective on marriage and morality and character and values and ethics and truth. No, you can't. It's simple as that. In fact, David Kinnaman, the president of the Barna Group, summed up that research study I just told you about, saying, the bottom line is that over the course of 50 years, we've become a very pluralistic, multi-faith, and in most cases, no-faith culture. And that is a distinct difference from our past. So we have to accept the fact that other persuasions, other belief systems, no belief systems, and moralities now compete for the hearts and minds of our boys and girls and our citizens. Real Christians in America today are a minority. Now, what do we do with that? That's what I want to spend the rest of my time on today, and that's what the rest of the series starting Wednesday night will be about. What do we do about that? Well, here's what we've mostly done about that. We've moaned and groaned and complained and griped. And that's just worthless. That does not only doesn't get anything done, it doesn't help us. It doesn't help our identity. It doesn't help our personality. I mean, what should we do about that? We have to learn how to adjust properly to our new minority status. But here's a major point I want to make. A minority position is not necessarily a bad place to be. It can be a good place to be. And I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but every time Christianity and the church has flourished, it's come out of a minority position. Every time. The New Testament, all of it, was written from a minority position. The New Testament church, which began on the day of Pentecost after Jesus' resurrection in AD 33, began in a minority position. It began just with Jews, and they were hostily opposed, kicked out of their homes, disowned by their families. That's what the book of Hebrews is about. And yet the church exploded at a time when it was in a minority position. And after it exploded rather persecution-free from outsiders, outside of Jews, for the first 20 or 30 years, then after Nero burned Rome and blamed the Christians, persecution exploded everywhere. And yet so did the church. They're a minority, but they're growing rapidly. Jesus and the early church understood what it was like to be a part of a persecuted fringe and a minority. In fact, the New Testament only makes sense when read from that perspective. And certainly, the fires of Reformation were lit among small bands of faithful folks living under the oppressive regime of the popes and the Inquisition. And the Restoration movement then was stoked by people who said, let's get away from organized religion and just go back to the Bible. A minority position. And certainly this was the position Daniel and his fellow Hebrews found themselves in when they were transported to Babylon. They were a faithful minority. So we're going to begin on Wednesday night studying the book of Daniel to uncover ways to live out our faith from a minority position. I mean, here's the question. How do we operate in a society, in a culture where the numbers and the momentum and the politics and the media and the entertainment industry and the schools all are against what we believe? How do we operate in that kind of an environment? Or in essence, how do you swim upstream? You know, an old bloated catfish can float downriver, but it takes a sleek, powerful salmon to swim against the current and not conform to the world. How do we do that? So sure, we can be a Christian when everybody in the room agrees with us, but what about when you're made to sit in the back of the bus? How committed are we to Jesus when we feel the sting of prejudice, or when our faith carries a stigma because we have it, or when it's a career liability and we may get fired because of what we say or what we believe or what we post on Facebook innocently? You see, that's when character must count. That's when Christian character must count. See, in a free society, authority is placed in the hands of the people, not a king, not a monarch. But in any free society, and we see this all through history, their survival depends upon the character of the people. One of our founders, Thomas Jefferson, in 1801 said, "The steady character of our countrymen is a rock to which we must safely moor." It's dependent on character. Another one of our founders, Madison, said, "Is there no virtue among us? If there be not, we are in a wretched situation." Virtue, character. Because no theoretical checks, no form of government can render us secure. To suppose that any form of government will secure liberty or happiness without any virtue in the people is a chimerical idea. Indeed it is. We have the right to liberty in the pursuit of happiness, but liberty in the pursuit of happiness apart from character and virtue, our founders from the beginning knew was foolish. Could not happen. You see, a lot of people confuse character with reputation, but the two are cousins rather than twins. Reputation is what people think you are. Character is what God knows you are. Your reputation is what people perceive on the outside. If you have the reputation of being a hard worker, you can sleep till noon. Your reputation is what people perceive on the outside, but your character is what you know is true on the inside. D.L. Moody used to say, if I take care of my character, my reputation will take care of itself. If I take care of my character, my reputation will take care of itself. It's been said that people are a lot like trees. The shadow of the tree is reputation. The fruit of the tree is our personality. but the root of the tree is what is most important. That is our character. Abraham Lincoln expanded upon that and said, character is like a tree and reputation like a shadow. The shadow is what we think of it. The tree is the real thing. Interesting thing I found while I was studying for this lesson that I did not know, and that is that in the beginning of the 20th century, most obituaries spent the majority of its time on the character of the person who died. Often didn't say anything about what job they held. Their obituary almost totally focused on the character of the person and their family. But by the end of the 20th century, that practice had virtually disappeared. And almost every obituary then started listing where the person had worked, what they had accomplished on their job through their lifetime. Notice that subtle change. What we do became more important than who we are. And if you Google Ngram data, it's a fascinating service that it really is. You ought to try it, particularly if you're a lover of literature and words. Ngram data or Ngram viewer will give you how many. If you type in a word, say you type in the word virtue, or you type in the word character like I did, or you type in the word reputation, it will give you how many times that word has been used in a book over the last 200 or 300 years. It's fascinating. But here was what was really fascinating about it. Words like character and conscience and virtue and morality have pretty well gone away. They were the most commonly used words decades ago. Now they're hardly used at all. Wow. We have decided to become a country and a people focused on what we do rather than what we are, what we desire rather than who we are, what we think we have accomplished rather than our character. And that's a sad place for us to be. That really is. So how do we deal with that? Where do we find the character that we need for a 21st century world that inevitably has shifted? We go to the Word of God and we find examples of people who experienced the exact same thing. And I cannot think of a better example of it than Daniel and his four-man band that Daniel chapter 1 introduces us to. Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Boys who were taken out of a culture in which their faith was the center of the culture and thrust into a culture where they were a small minority. How'd they deal with it? And right off the bat, right out of the chute, we read in Daniel 1:8 that he purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself. And that's the starting point for what we have to do when we're outnumbered. We have to purpose in our heart that we will not defile ourselves, even though we are in the minority. I'll close by telling you about a multimillionaire who asked a builder to construct a house, and he showed him the blueprints, And it's going to be this beautiful, gorgeous house worthy of a multimillionaire. And he showed the builder the blueprints, and he said, "Can you do this?" And he said, "Sure." And he said, "All right, I'm going to give you an ordinate amount of money. I'm going to give you more than I think it would cost to build a house." But he said, "Whatever's left over, you could keep." Oh, that's too big a temptation for a person without character. That's too big a temptation for a person with no virtue. And the builder didn't have it. And so he thought to himself, "I can build a house for a fraction of this money and then pocket the rest of the money for myself." So he began to throw the house together quickly. He placed studs 5 feet apart. He pounded only 1 nail per board. He slapped on a thin coat of paint. He threw on the shingles and barely covered the roof of the house. When he was finished, he knew the house wasn't solid, but at least it looked good on the outside. Nobody could tell because they hadn't seen what had gone on the inside. Nobody knew that but him. And so he pocketed all the rest of the money, and he felt really good about what he had done and the profit that he had made. And he took the keys to the multimillionaire and he said, "Here's the keys to your new house." And the multimillionaire said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you one thing. The house is my gift to you. It's yours." Can you imagine when that guy tried to sell that house and it went up for inspection? A day of reckoning was coming. Now listen, each one of us today are constructing a spiritual house. We're doing it in an environment that frankly is much tougher than the environment I started building mine in. Because when I started building my house, my elementary school teacher, Miss Carney, would slap my hand and take me in to my parents and tell them what I had done wrong. And then I'd get a second whipping there. And all of society and all of culture basically supported a Christian character and virtue and honesty and citizenship and responsibility and trustworthiness and respect and caring. And we know deep down in our heart of hearts that's not so today. So it's harder. I understand it's harder. But just remember this, especially the younger you are in here today, because maybe you've never known anything other than the culture in which we're now living. Just remember this. Whatever house you're building of yourself, you've got to live in. It's going to be yours. So make sure you build a household of faith, of character, of courage, of commitment, of determination, so that you will be able, even when you are outnumbered, to say, if God is for us, who can be against us?